Prime Minister, you said before your budget, by sharing the load, we lighten the load. Now, the truth of this budget is the load falls heaviest on the poorest, on the sickest, on those least able to bear the load. Where is the fairness in this budget?
Well, everyone plays their part. High income earners pay the deficit levy. Members of Parliament take a pay freeze, and everyone will pay fuel excise indexation. So I think the load is fairly shared because that's the Australian way. But Fran, let's talk about why this is happening. This is all happening because we were living beyond our means. The former government gave us the sixth biggest deficits in our history. It was debt and deficit stretching out as far as the eye can see. We're not doing this because we are somehow political sadomasochists. We are doing this because it is absolutely necessary for the long-term welfare of our country.
You get to make the choices. That's why you're saying you're doing it. You get to make the choices about what you do. And you talk then about everybody bearing the load. But if you drill down into the numbers, there was an example this week of a distribution, a single mother actually on $45,000 a year with one child. This budget was going to cost her around $6,500, around $2,690. You said, as we heard there, this will cost you, your contribution, around $6,500. You earn 11 times more than this woman, but you pay 2.5 times the contribution. How is that fair?
I just want to get back to the fact that we could not just sit here and do nothing, because to do nothing would be to rob the future. It would be to make our children and grandchildren pay for our excesses or the excesses of the former government. So doing nothing was not an option. Now let's look at the precise issue you raised. I don't have front of mind the figures for people on $45,000, but if you look at a sole income family with one child under 6 on $30,000, even after these changes, that family will continue to get almost $19,000 from the taxpayer. So I think the fair go principle, which is very important for our country, continues in this budget. What we also want to do, though, Fran, is encourage people to have a go. We do have to reduce unsustainable expenditure. We do have to reduce what's been described as middle-class welfare if all of us are going to prosper in the years ahead.
Sure, but again it comes down to who bears the load. When we put out the notice that you're going to be on the program, we've had a few letters and calls from pensioners unhappy. One pensioner particularly unhappy at you cutting the pensioner education supplement or payment. Another several very unhappy about you cutting the pensioner bonus. Why are you picking on pensioners in this budget?
We're not picking on anyone. But
they feel like you're picking on them.
Well, we said pre-election that the low-income bonus would go. We said pre-election that the school kids bonus would go.
You said pre-election no change to pensions.
And there are no changes to pensions
well, that's not how they feel it, because they were getting these payments and now they're not going to be getting these payments.
But the low-income bonus, we were quite upfront with people before the election that was going to go. And we were also quite upfront, Fran, that we would get the budget back under control. You might remember the mantra. It was stop the boats, repeal the carbon tax, build the roads of the 21st century, and get the budget back under control. So people, I think, were on notice that we were going to do what was necessary to ensure that we were not being a burden on our children and grandchildren.
I wonder how you think, though, that people were on notice that they weren't going to receive cuts to their pensions or they weren't going to see cuts to health or cuts to education. When you said there would be no cuts to health, there would be no cuts to education, you said it over and over again. Why did you think you could get away with saying that if you weren't going to deliver that?
But Fran, again, we have a very serious problem here, a problem where we were living beyond our means, and the first duty of government is not to do what's easy, but to do what's right and necessary for our country. And we could not go on running up massive debts for our children and grandchildren to pay. That would be a form of intergenerational theft. Now, you ask about health and education. We promised that there would be no reductions over the forward estimates. What's happened is that the first of the out years has now come into the forward estimates, and we never said that we were going to maintain Labor's pie-in-the-sky promises in the out years. We never said that. And all these claims of massive cuts to health and education, none of that money was ever in the budget. And what we've said is that there will be a slower rate of growth in what were the out years than Labor promised.
I think you've got a problem, though, in terms of trust. I mean, you are saying now, I think what you're saying is that the promise to restore the budget was always paramount. But I don't think that everybody heard all those other promises, thought that. And so now, how do we know in the future what to believe when you say things and what not to believe?
Well, I know that people hear different things. Someone can say something and people hear different things. But we constantly talked about Labor spending like a drunken sailor. It was always obvious that we were going to have to rein back unsustainable spending. We constantly talked about Labor indulging in a cash splash with borrowed money, and now we've done what is necessary. Now, look, we could have continued to try to fool people and say you don't have to change, but that would frankly have been pretending to people that our country could somehow go on living on borrowed money. You cannot endlessly live on borrowed money, and that's what our country had been doing for the 6 years of the Labor government.
And I will move on in a moment because I know you've been asked about the broken promises a lot this week. But before I do, I just wanted, just following on from what you said there, play back to you something you said on ABC Radio before the election. Let's have a look.
I've seen the disaster that this government has created for itself by saying one thing and doing another. And, John, I don't want to be like that. I really don't. And if we do win the election and we immediately say, we got it all wrong, we've now got to do all these different things, we will instantly be just as bad as the current government has been. And I just refuse to be like that.
With respect, Prime Minister, you are being like that.
Well, that's in the end for the people to judge, Fran. But I believe that we have fundamentally kept faith with the promises that we made pre-election. Yes, I accept that the deficit levy will impact on the top 3% of taxpayers. Yes, I accept that the fuel excise indexation will cost in the first year the average family 40 cents a week. I accept all of that. But we did say that we were going to get the budget back under control, and I believe that this was what the people of Australia elected us to do. If I'm wrong, they will cast their votes accordingly at the next election. But why would I be doing this? Why would I be exposing myself, Fran, to a world of political pain?
Expending your political capital.
Why would I be exposing myself? Why would my colleagues be exposing themselves and ourselves to a world of political pain if we didn't think it was absolutely necessary for the long-term good of our country?
Let's go to some of the measures. As I say, all budget about choices. You've walked away from the agreement with the states and territories over funding schools and funding hospitals into the future to the tune of $80 billion. It's quite clear in the budget. You say you want grown-up adult states. What's grown-up and adult about breaking this agreement with the states with no warning?
Well, we said pre-election that we were not bound in the out years. We explicitly said time and time again pre-election that we were bound by the forward estimates. We weren't bound by the out years. Now, of course, the first of the out years has come into the forward estimates, and we've been totally upfront. We've said the money will continue to increase, but it will increase at a slower rate than before.
$80 billion less is written in the budget papers. The states say they've got a signed agreement and they are shocked. Or are they feigning shock?
Well, look, I'm not going to run a commentary on the states.
They're running one on you right now.
What I am saying is that what we have done is precisely what we said we would do before the election. We said we would honour the then government's commitments over the then forward estimates. We said we weren't bound by their pie-in-the-sky promises for the out years. We said it was unsustainable. We said it was undeliverable, and we're not going to try to deliver it.
But you also said we're a unity ticket on Gonski, and there's no difference between Kevin Rudd and myself when it comes to school funding.
For 4 years.
Do you think people heard the 4 years?
Well, look, we always said and this was the subject of argy-bargy during the election, if you'll remember, Fran. We were accused constantly by Labor during the election of not continuing the Gonski funding. They said this pre-election.
What about the $50 billion for hospitals?
And they're right. Well, again, we said we would only be bound over the then forward estimates, and the first of the out years has now come into the budget.
So what happens now then to the schools and hospitals? What happens to those national agreements to lift standards of treatment and schooling?
Well, again, Fran, let's get back to the problem. The problem is that we were living beyond our means, and we cannot keep spending money that we don't have. We cannot keep mortgaging the future. We cannot keep ripping off our children and our grandchildren, and this government won't do that. Now, we also said pre-election, and I've repeated that regularly since, that we would have a Federation white paper, and that would be the opportunity for the Commonwealth and the states to sit down and work out what's going to happen in 3 years' time.
So you just preempted that, though. Why didn't you wait for the white paper?
We're not talking about next week or next month or even next year. We're talking about changes in 3 years' time. We've got an enormous amount of time to sit down and work things out. But what we're not going to do is continue unsustainable spending with borrowed money. That would be wrong. That would be an offence against the future.
You've also said that the states should run the schools and hospitals. They run them, they should pay for them, they should fund them. But you're taking away this $80 billion. So how should the states raise this money? Should they raise it from the states, the taxes they have, the gambling taxes, the payroll taxes, the stamp duties? Should they lift those?
Well, Fran, this $80 billion was never in any budget. It was an unsustainable promise for the out years made by a government that knew it was never going to have to deliver.
So are you saying then, as you look forward, as Prime Minister of this country, you think we can do better in our schools and hospitals without that money? You can be a Prime Minister, or are you happy to be Prime Minister of a country that has different standards of hospital care and different standards of school education in different states?
Well, I think we can't
have everything without the money, can we?
Well, money isn't everything, Fran, and this is part of the problem. Over the years, we've thought that the only solution to school problems and to health problems was more money. Now, money's important, no doubt about that, but are you really saying, Fran, that we can't be more efficient in schools? That
no, but $80 billion is a lot of efficiency.
But that money was never in any budget. It was a pie-in-the-sky promise by a Labor government that knew it wouldn't be around to deliver on it.
The states are meeting this afternoon. They say that money was in the agreements they all signed with the Commonwealth, and they want you to stick to it. They say if you don't stick to it, then how else are they going to get this money? Are you considering giving them a share of Commonwealth-raised income tax?
Fran, we always said that we weren't bound by those agreements in the out years, and the first of the out years has now come onto the budget. And we've said to the states, we will continue to increase your funding, but not at the same unaffordable rate that Labor was promising. So we've just been absolutely upfront with the states, and we've now got 3 years to sit down and have a mature adult discussion about this and work out what the best way forward is.
Should a bigger, broader GST be part of that discussion?
Well, look, that's a matter for the states. I don't
Do you have a view?
I don't propose changing the GST at all, because the GST is a state tax. The revenue all goes to the states.
It's a federal tax, but the revenue goes to the states. Under the legislation as it is, all states would have to ask. Now, at the moment, they're not going to do that, probably because 3 of them are facing election within the next 8 months or so. But if all the states came to you and said, Prime Minister, we need you to increase the GST, would you agree to that?
Well, you're asking me a hypothetical, and I don't normally respond to hypotheticals, Fran. Let's wait and see what happens here. But we've got 3 years, and this idea that there is some kind of an emergency because things are going to have to be adjusted in 3 years' time is not right. But I'm looking forward to having lots of discussions with the states over coming months and years. And I am absolutely confident that at the end of those discussions, we will continue to have good schools and good hospitals, and we'll have a better federation as well.
And higher taxes?
Well, my objective is lower taxes. That's my objective. I didn't come into politics to put taxes up. I came into politics to bring taxes down. They should be lower, simpler and fairer, and that's what will happen under this coalition
I'm glad you mentioned
government.
emergency, because the states are unhappy, and one state minister, in New South Wales State Health Minister, is already threatening to open the emergency wards in our hospital to GPs, so people can go there, not pay the co-payment, and the Commonwealth bears the brunt of that through the Medicare rebate.
Well, look,
it's going to be chaos.
No, I think that if that sounds like it's a creative response by the states.
You like that idea?
Well, look, the states are perfectly entitled to do what's open to them as a sovereign government, and I know in different states in the past, different states have taken advantage of the Medicare arrangement to deliver what they thought were better treatments for their patients, and that's fair enough.
Prime Minister, it now goes to the Senate. The Senate will be a challenge for you, this one and the next one. You know that, and you've said some horse trading will go on. Where are you prepared to horse trade?
Well, what we aren't prepared to do is to sell our kids down the river by continuing to spend way beyond our means. What we have laid out for the Australian people this week in the budget is a careful, considered, sensible path back to surplus, and we're not walking away from that. Obviously, we're happy to talk about different details with minor parties and independents in the Senate, but they've got to accept that we are the government, we were elected to run the country, we've got to make tough decisions as well as easy decisions. We can't keep this cash splash with borrowed money going, and let's have that discussion.
One of the toughest decisions, and Labor will oppose this, and so will the Greens, I understand, is the decision to keep young people under 30 off the dole for 6 months if they're not earning or learning, if they're not training. People all across the community regard that as very, very harsh. Can you imagine how those people are going to live if they aren't capable of learning, if they aren't capable of going to training because their life is too chaotic or shambolic, or there's many reasons why? What are they going to do?
Well, we're not giving up on those people and just saying, OK, here's a cheque, we're going to forget about you. We're not doing that at all. There will be services that will work with people to try to ensure that they are either earning or learning, and the highly disadvantaged people will continue to get access to unemployment benefits, but work-ready youngsters won't be allowed to leave school and go onto the dole. They just won't be, Fran.
But you can't stop them leaving school. They will. They will, because some people's lives are not anything like your life or my life. They will leave school. How do they live?
Well, if they leave school and they don't get a job and they're work-ready, we expect them to go into some form of education or training.
What's your line in the sand here? You've talked double dissolution. Are you prepared to go to an election if you can't get this budget through? And is this a budget to take to an election?
Fran, whenever the next election comes, the people will judge us on what we've done. And before the election, we said we'd stop the boats, we'd scrap the carbon tax, we'd build the roads of the 21st century, we'd get the budget back under control. This is precisely what we are doing. And I believe that we will be able to say to the people at the next election, whenever it is, and I expect it in the middle of 2016, we'll be able to say to the people, we said this is what we'd do. We've carefully, purposefully, methodically done it. Now it's in your hands.
But you're not threatening a double dissolution over this budget?
I am promising a strong and decisive government. That's what I'm promising, and I am confident that the minor parties and the independents in the Senate will understand that we could not go on living the way we were. We could not go on mortgaging the future. Now, if they don't like what we're putting up, what are they going to put up as an alternative?
Prime Minister, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Fran.